Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today we are going to talk about strategies and how to counter Dominatrix Iden. So Dominatrix Iden is a new control deck that has been developed relatively recently. What I mean by relatively recently is that most of the decks that you see in the meta right now were decks that were developed and tested and created before even the release of the game. So even though some people have been working on this deck for over a month, it still is relatively new compared to all the other decks in the meta. So a lot of people are very freaked out by this deck because they think because it's a deck that engage with the game mechanics in a very different ways than other traditional Star Wars Limited deck do. It plays almost no units whatsoever, and focuses on answering your threat until you run out of cards and just use Vigilance to mill you out. And a lot of people do not like that kind of deck. A lot of people simply do not think it's fun to play against a deck like this. Um, and I personally disagree with this. I mean, I've been playing Magic for a very long time in Eternal format where those kind of decks are relatively normal. So to me, I don't really see this as someone who's preventing you from playing the game, but rather kind of a different game altogether when you're trying to outrun the opponent, when you're trying to outvalue the opponent, and I think it's a very interesting game, personally. I do agree, however, that the Mirror of Control is those kind of decks is very boring and very weird as well. But you can always, if you're in a meta that is filled with this kind of deck, you can always, I think there's going to be alternative, and I'm going to show this in this video. So, obviously, one way you can make this experience more fun for you, I think a lot of people also don't really know how to deal with deck like this, and that's why they're very scared. Because here's the thing, beating a deck like this requires a very different approach to the game than anything you've encountered before on this game. So obviously, a lot of people don't necessarily know how to deal with it, and today in this video I'm going to try to gather all my knowledge and give you as many tools as possible to kind of improve your matchup against this deck. So, by the way, I call it the Dominatrix Iden deck here because that's the deck I've showed in my video before. If you don't know what deck I'm talking about, I will put in the description the full deck of the deck I'm talking about. This guide works for the specifically the Iden Red Dominatrix, but I think it works for any control deck for that matter, which has this game plan of just answering everything and just vigilance. So there's different versions of the deck. There's the mono blue version, there's the yellow version, and there's the green version. Obviously, green is a little bit different, even though some people build it, as I said, almost with no units, just like the red version. So there's different versions of them. The most popular being the red one, but this guide is gonna be valid for all the different type of dominatrix deck that there's out there. So without further ado, let's go into first of all the general tips advice that I give whenever you're encountering a deck like this. The first tip is to play as fast as you can. So this comes a lot to your training and to how much you've tested against the deck. If you have play tested against the deck, if you've prepared yourself against this deck, you're naturally going to be playing faster than if you don't, and without damaging your plays, without damaging the quality of the decisions that you're making. And playing fast is very important because here's what can happen. If you play very slow and you lose the first game, you are going to be in big trouble because it's very unlikely that the second game is going to go to term and you're simply going to lose 1-0. Generally speaking, if you win against an Iden red deck, games it's in short games usually. If the game goes very very long, usually it's an indicator that the Iden deck is going to win. So if you play slowly and win, there's likely going to be enough time for a second game to happen, and if you lose that second game, then for the third game you're going to be in a very bad spot and you're going to have a draw. So any of those outcomes are not good, whether it's a draw or whether it's a lose, and you put yourself in that situation whenever you play slowly. If you play fast and you let the best of 3 go to its term and goes to its final stage, it's going to be better for you, and it's also going to be better for the opponent. By the way, this advice is also valid for the people who are playing the Iden red. Either way, it's drawing is the worst thing that can happen in a game, because not only are you losing the game if you draw, your opponent also loses the game, which is not good for your goal average, because in Swiss, goal average determines the record of your opponents determines your goal average. So you want your opponents to succeed as much as possible outside of your own game. So the ideal is to win against people who have a lot of wins. And whenever you're losing, not only are you losing, but you're also making your opponent lose as well. So play as fast as you can, because whatever the outcome, whether he wins or whether you win, it would be better than a draw anyway. So try to play as quickly as you can, and this comes with practice, and it is definitely very doable. Like, for example, I think the idea that every game with this deck will either be a draw or a 1-0 victory, that is not accurate to my experience. Like, I've played this deck against quite a bit, and I was able to wrap up games at a reasonable time. For example, I think on Monday I played 2 best of 5s, and I was able to finish those 2 best of 5s in about 2 hours 30 minutes, which is very reasonable. Like, and we played across those 2 best of 5, we played 8 games, so it is very possible. You just need to know. You just need to play fast, because yes, you play a lot of turns. That is inevitable. There's going to be a lot of turns in the game, especially if you are behind. But turns are very quick, because the board states are very simple, and if you play fast, you can get through the motions and get through the turns very quickly. Another tips to make game not to shorten games is to know when to concede. Very often, I see people play against that style of deck, and they simply don't concede. They don't concede when they've lost the game. If you are in top deck modes and your opponent has 8 cards in hand and you have no board states, and your opponent has like 20 HP, you've lost the game. Like, there's nothing you can do. Like, you are out of this game. So with this also comes with experience. Play test against the deck. Play against the deck, and you will know what is the moment where you know there's it's time for you to concede. And this will also obviously allow you, especially if you're losing, if you drag the game longer, then there's never going to be a game 2, and even more game 3. Keep in mind that if you lose your game 1 against this deck, you need to play 2 additional games in order to be able to win the series. So if you drag too long to concede, you will never get a chance to come back in the series, because at best you will be able to get a draw, which is, as I said, even worse than a loss to some extent. So in my opinion, you should know when to concede. That is very important. Another general tip that I give is keep resorting. One of the strategy of the Iden deck is to basically invalidate your removal. It's to invalidate a massive portion of your deck, because it doesn't play any units, or very few. Or the only unit that it plays are just here as I basically used as removal. So any card that is a removal is unlikely to be a good card in this matchup. Obviously, there is some times where you might need removals. Once again, you want to get rid of an Iden and stuff like this. But most of the removal you have in your decks are going to be useless. That means you're going to have a lot of dead cards. So my advice is to resource, to keep resourcing throughout the game, and this will allow you to play multiple threats in one turn. And this is the worst enemy of a control deck. If you're able to put a lot of threats all at once, inevitably some of those units will get through and will be able to connect and deal damage. So, and the way to be able to play multiple threat is to keep resourcing. Normally, an aggro deck, for example, like Sabine, is only advised to resource up to 6, because this is enough to play any card in your deck and also to play 2-3 drops in one turn. But against a control deck like this, you want to be able to do some really powerful combos. You need to be able to really play out loads of cards all at once to overwhelm your opponent. And it is true in every matchup. So keep resourcing, I think, is a good strategy in this deck. Obviously, don't resource beyond reason. I think depending on the deck, once you get past 8, 9, sometimes 10 resources, I think it's kind of pointless to resource beyond that. And once again, that is depending on the matchup. If you're playing control, maybe you can resource up to 12, 13, sometimes even 15, to be able to once again pull multiple massive threats all at once, and really overwhelm your opponent. But generally speaking, whenever you're playing against that type of deck, you're going to be resourcing beyond what you usually would be resourcing it. So let's talk about the tips that I give to the aggro players. So if you watch my deck tech videos, I think that aggros are the decks that will perform the best against those type of pure control decks. And the reason being is because they are decks that that take a very long time to kill. And if you take forever to kill an aggro deck, especially a Sabine deck, the Sabine will eventually find a way to finish you off using some what we call out of hand damage, the damage that don't require new board states. So typically the ping from Sabine, the incarnational damage that happened from the K2 SO, and also the 4 cause I believe in, which is probably the best example. So the game plan for aggro is pretty simple. You're going to be basically you're going to be playing super aggressive, of course, in the early stage of the game to try to do as much damage as possible. Your opponent inevitably will stabilize. You should keep pinging with Sabine all game long to make sure that your opponent's life total doesn't get out of hand, and to keep his life total relatively to keep the damage on the base relatively high, so you can finish him off with multiple 4 cause I believe in. And the thing is, like, because the control deck is going to take forever to kill you, you have more than enough time to gather the perfect hand of multiple 4 cause I believe in. So this is why I was saying, like, resource beyond. Like, there's games where I've literally played 3 4 cause I believe in one turn. I played like the classic play of, like, you can go wolf to prevent your opponent from healing, and then just play multiple 4 cause I believe in. And the control deck really gives you a lot of time to do this. And I found that it was very difficult for the control decks to actually beat that game plan. The first advice I give to an aggro player would be to play around Bombing Run. So Bombing Run is a powerful card, but it can be played around. Obviously, if you have multiple units that have 3 health in one, so the two things I can advise for Bombing Run is try to play units that have above 4 health. Try to make sure you don't have more than 1 unit with 3 health in an arena. And try to split arena, of course. Traditionally against most other decks, as an aggro player, you want to arena dodge. But here there's not really any arena dodging because your opponent is typically not going to have any bolt presence on either arena. So in this case, against a control deck like this, the best way is to split, is to have a few space units and a few ground units, so then you're limiting the impact of Bombing Run. So yeah, play units that have above 4 health, prioritize unit that has above 4 health, and split those units from the ground and the ground and the space arena to limit the impact of Bombing Run. Obviously play around Super Laser Blast as well. Don't empty your hand when your opponent is about to get to 8 resources. Super Laser Blast is not as big of a deal against aggro as it is against other decks because it intervenes very late in the game. But obviously keep in mind Super Laser Blast is ultimately going to be the way your opponent is going to stabilize the board. So either withstand a few units to not completely commit to a Super Laser Blast, and or make sure, or if you do commit to a Super Laser Blast, to a lot of units on the board for Super Laser Blast, make sure you have some sort of backup plan. The second advice is to play Sabine over Leia. I think that there are some matchups where Leia is better than Sabine, but I think against this deck in particular, if you are playing in a meta where Dominatrix Iden is going to see a lot of play, or if you really want to beat that deck because you hate it so much, then I will strongly advise you to play Sabine over Leia. Leia really relies on board presence to be able to use her ability. If she doesn't have board presence, she cannot use her ability. She's pretty much useless. And so that is a problem because Dominatrix Iden, more than any other deck in the game, is the best deck to keep the board clean because it plays the most removals. Sabine not only does not rely on board presence to have an impact on the game, she also is able to counter the healing coming from Iden. Iden is going to be healing a lot throughout the game with her ability. You can counterplay this with Sabine. So Sabine is much, much, much better than Leia it really changed the matchup where I believe that a Leia aggro would have trouble against Iden red, while I think Sabine against Iden would have actually a good matchup. Never resource your direct damage. Your direct damage is going to be the way you finish the game. It's the only way for you to deal damage without relying on board presence. Board presence, especially late in the game, is going to be very difficult for you to come by because Iden is simply going to answer everything you got. So don't resource your direct damage, and keep your 4 costs, I believe, your K2 SOs at all costs, because those are going to be the way you're going to finish the game. So a well-timed, sorry, there's a spelling mistake here, well-timed Wolfie will win you the game. So what does that mean is that whenever you have a Wolfie in hand, don't simply just play it early on in the game when it doesn't have much impact. The anti-heal ability of Wolf is extremely important in this matchup. So play it when it matters. So for example, one of the best things I like to do against Wolf is that I have, let's say, multiple 4 cards I believe in hand, and I know that if I can play those multiple 4 cards I believe in, I will be able to win the game. Unless my opponent is able to play some healing cards in between those 4 cards I believe in. So if I play Wolf and then multiple 4 cards I believe in, I know I win the game, and there's nothing my opponent can do about it. So try to keep your Wolf for the good opportunity, because if you play 4 cards I believe in and you don't have a Wolf backup, your opponent can simply play like a healing card in between those 4 cards I believe in, and he's just gonna, and he won't die, and then you're gonna be running out of gas. So here's the best card you have in this matchup. So as I said, Wolf, 4 cards I believe in, K2 SO. Obviously, and also another card that I really like in this matchup is U-Wing Reinforcement. So U-Wing Reinforcement is a very efficient way to repopulate the board with a bunch of units. It gives you more chances to find your K2SO, it gives you more chances to find your Wolf. And if you have a unit on the board, you can get like you can combine a Wing Leader with a Fleet Lieutenant and just deal a bunch of damage to the base. So it's very powerful. It's a very good way to repopulate the board after your opponent plays a Super Laser Blast. And having to resource up to 7 in this matchup is not really that big of a deal. So I really advise people to play U-Wing Reinforcement either in the main deck or in the sideboard. It's very helpful in this matchup. Next, Boba. Okay, I'm not sure how I feel about giving advice to Boba, to Boba players in order to make their deck even better, but here we are. Here's what you need to do if you're playing Boba against Iden Red. So one of the difficulties in this matchup for Boba is that there are going to be a lot of cards which are going to be either completely useless or a lot worse, because you're playing against an Iden control that is basically just pure control. So all of your units with ambush are going to become a lot worse. You won't be able to use your leader's ability. You won't be able to crack your Super Laser Technician, which means that your chances to go for the big Boba turn 1 turn earlier using ramp is effectively divided by 2, because you can only rely on resupplies to do so. So there's a lot of problems for Boba in this matchup, and Boba also typically is not as fast as Aggro, is not capable of killing the control player fast enough for the control players to come online. And all those difficulties makes this matchup relatively difficult for Boba. With that being said, Boba being the best deck in the game and still having access to some of the most busted cards in the game, and means that even in this matchup, I feel like the matchup is still very much 50-50 because Boba is just so busted. But if you are in a meta where this deck sees a lot of play, well, I can give you a few tips to make this matchup even better for you. The first thing, of course, is to play around Super Laser Blast, just like everything else. You gotta be careful about Super Laser Blast. You gotta play around it. Don't overcommit too many units on the board if you don't have any backup. So play around Super Laser Blast. It comes into play on turn 8, so it's predictable. The second tip I can give is to use your Whaley to bounce your own Fire Spray that got Entrenched. One of the best cards against you that your opponent has access to is Entrench, because Entrench is a very cheap way to answer Fire Spray. Usually you're going to try to squeeze a Fire Spray when your opponent has already tapped his resources, so you know your Fire Spray cannot get killed by a Super Laser Blast or even worse, a Vanquish. But then your opponent is still going to have access to Entrench. But the good news is that if you Waylay your own Fire Spray, it's like you basically drew a Fire Spray. because yeah, you get rid of the entrench, and then you get to replay fire spray, and it's going to come into play on tap. So it's a very strong play, and waylay is basically useless in this matchup. That's pretty much the only way to use this card in this matchup. In my opinion, it's very worth it. I do not side out waylay in this matchup because it's useful to deal with entrench. Third advice is to never resource fire spray. In some matchup, especially against aggro, multiple fire spray is often kind of overkill, and it clutters your hand early on, and you need to be able to make early game plays if you want to win the game. So multiple fire sprays, especially if you get them early on, you can justify resourcing a fire spray, even though it is one of the best cards in your deck. With that being said, against control, never under any circumstance do you resource fire spray. It is the best card of your deck. It is a way for you to follow up with a lot of damage, on the opponent after your opponent went for a super laser blast or something. So it's a very, very powerful card. My best use of fire spray is, as I said, to play it after a super laser blast. Super laser blast has happened, play the fire spray, deal 5 damage. So kind of, though, never resource fire spray. On the other hand, you should resource your Super Laser Technician or even side out your Super Laser Technician because they are useless in this matchup. They basically will never get killed until very late in the game. So yes, I guess it's fine to have a 2-1 units that your opponent does not want to kill, I guess. But for 3 resources, I think you could do much better things than this. For 3 resources, you might be able to do much better things, and it's so easy to kill because it has 1 health. SLT is not really a great card. For me, Resupply turn 2 is the best card in your deck, and it's something that is worth noticing. So as I said, don't necessarily like disregard Super Laser Technician, but it's still, in my opinion, a fairly weak option compared to any other 3-drop you could play. So yeah. Moving on to the tech card that you can run to improve the matchup. So basically, my first tip is to play Seasoned Short Trooper over Viper Probe Droid. Viper Probe Droid is better against aggro. Seasoned Short Trooper is better against control. So if you want to tilt your Boba to deal against control, I strongly advise Seasoned Short Trooper, because Seasoned Short Trooper has basically does not die to make an opening, so it's more difficult to kill for the deck. And it becomes a real big threat if it's not being dealt with. It becomes a 4-3 later on in the game and puts tons of pressure on the control deck. So I think Seasoned Short Trooper is honestly one of the best, is the best turn 2 play you could, turn 1 play you could have in this matchup, and is really a solid card. The other cards are a little bit more obscure and are cards that I advise to be played mostly in the sideboard. The Emperor's Legion is an excellent answer to Super Laser Blast. Basically, opponent plays Super Laser Blast. All you need is 2 mana. 2 resources up, and you can just play an Emperor Legion, and you get all of your cards back into your hand, which is very cool. Which is very cool. And once again, if you do not run out of gas, if you never run out of gas, it is so incredibly efficient. It's also an excellent answer when your opponent manages to vanquish one of your fire spray. You press Emperor Legion, you get your fire spray back into your hand. It is very powerful. So a couple of copies of Emperor's Legion, if you are in a meta where this deck is a big presence, Emperor's Legion is amazing. Relentless is another excellent late game threat in this deck. Obviously, very difficult to kill because he's going to have to throw an event under the bus, and then he's going to have to play Vanquish to deal with it. So it is definitely difficult to deal with Relentless sometimes. He can play Entrench, I guess, to keep it, but if that's the case, then at least the Relentless ability is still there to block events, and it's going to make everything else more complicated later on down the line. With Relentless in play, also very difficult to play Super Laser Blast, because then once again you need to have you need to be at basically 11 resources to be able to play a cheap event and then play a Super Laser Blast after that. So Relentless is the best late game card you could play. And then if you play Relentless and Emperor's Legion, if your opponent managed to deal with Relentless, you play Emperor's Legion, get the Relentless back in your deck. So once again, if you want to improve this matchup, think about having a couple of Relentless. And then if you want to go even further into trying to screw up this deck, I really like Prepare to Take Off, because Prepare to Take Off, it digs very, very deep in the deck. It is card advantage, which is very useful in this matchup, and allows you to get 2 vehicles. What are the best cards in your deck against pure control? Well, Relentless and Fire Spray. If you can get those 2 cards from this, let's say you play 2 Relentless and you're already playing 3 Fire Sprays, that's like a lot of very strong cards you can get. Obviously, you can play other vehicles as well, but already if you get any of those 2 cards from this, it is already worth it. So I think if you're afraid of running out of gas, prepare to take off is an excellent answer to try to deal with this. So I think if you play, obviously I don't advise necessarily to play all of them. You have to be careful because the sideboard space is limited. But if you are in a meta that is like this, that is very oriented on this deck, and you're playing Boba Green, those are excellent options to consider in order to deal with it. It really does help tremendously. Next, control. The control matchup. So for the control matchup, it's a bit more difficult. If you're playing control, there's 2 approaches you can take. The first one is to fight them at their own game, is to basically play the same card that the Iden control deck is going to be using to beat you. You can use them against them. So there's no reason for you to not be able to run those cards. All the control decks that are out there do have access to blue, so you can play Vigilance out of Aspect, just like they do. And you can also run Restock, which is universal to everybody. So you can basically fight them at their own game. I know this is not going to be the approach that a lot of people are going to be wanting to do, because it's very boring and it's kind of like create this kind of weird game where is whoever can mill the right cards. So it's kind of a very kind of a Russian roulette game where you play the Vigilance, and then if you happen to be milling opponents' Vigilances. And I understand that you're not necessarily into the kind of thing, but theoretically speaking, from a purely theoretical standpoint, if you play the right cards, you have the same chances in this matchup. You can turn this matchup into a 50-50 because it turns out that you both are going to be playing the same tools to kind of beat each other. The second approach is to overpower your opponent and to simply try to be the aggressor, and instead of relying on early aggression like a Sabine deck would, try to rely on threats that are very difficult to answer and simply just overpower your opponent with more card advantage without valuing your opponent. Something very important to understand with the Iden red deck is that it's a deck that doesn't do a lot of card advantage. It really relies on top decking to answer your threats. It doesn't have any card draw. It just relies on drawing 2 cards per turn and making value with triple laser blast and stuff. So if you play a deck that does have a lot of card draw, that does have ways to overpower the opponent, then you can decide to kind of overpower your opponent. And also ramp, in that case, is very useful. If you're playing a green control decks, you can simply just ramp faster than your opponent and overpower your opponent with just more resources and just more cards. So we'll see how we do this. So first of all, for the first approach, obviously playing the Vigilances in the main deck, obviously playing the Restock, so you can kind of put your cards back at the bottom of the deck. Remember, whenever you're playing Restock, you can also play the Restock itself from the discard pile back on top of the deck, and you should always do this because by the time the effect of the card resolves, the Restock is already in your discard pile, so you can put the Restock back. Another card that I really like is Bounty Hunter Crew, and that is valid even if you play this out of Aspect for 8 resources, puts a threat on the board, and at the same time allows you to get back your Vigilance back into your hand. If your Vigilance have been milled, normally that's a game ending. That's like very, very powerful. Bounty Hunter Crews, get back your Vigilance back into your hand. Same with the Restock. Your Restock has been milled, Bounty Hunter Crew, get the Restock back into your hand. Another card that is great as well is Search Your Feelings. Allows you to search for your Restock, search for your Vigilance before they get milled. Give you more chances to hit those cards. So you can really have a very strong anti-control package by playing all those cards. Your opponent can also play those cards, so it's whoever has the most tech in the matchup who kind of has the advantage in this case. If you're going for the overpowering approach, obviously I only advise the overpowering approach if you're playing a control that plays green. This is obviously important. So here you got the Emperor's Legion. Just like for the Boba matchup, your opponent plays a sweeper, gets rid of everything he plays on Emperor's Legion, get your cards back into your hand. Relentless, we already talked about it. Prepare to take off, we already talked about it. You can get your Relentless, your Devastators, your Avengers, your big cards, and then you can just start overpowering your opponent, finds you more chances. Another card that I really like is Gram of Taken, because it will search for Imperial cards, so you can get Relentless with this. you can get the Emperor's Legions, and you can also get Vader. Vader is a very good card against control because he puts 2 threats in play at the same time, making it more difficult to deal with for the opponent. So also Grand Moff Tarkin gives you some board presence, gives you some threat that your opponent will have to deal with. So it's a very good card. So yeah, Emperor's Legion is an Imperial card, so you can get Emperor's Legion with Grand Moff Tarkin. It's just very strong. And here you can just kind of outvalue the opponents. In this case, playing ramps is very important. So if you're playing any Palpatine green, Krennic green, or Iden green, this is a strategy that I think is worth exploring, and try to really overpower your opponent in this way. Now a few tips for Han. So Han, in my opinion, has a relatively good matchup against Iden Pure Control, simply because the deck has the ability to it doesn't rely on resupply to ramp, while if you're playing Boba, your Super Laser Technician cannot ramp you, so you have to rely on resupply, which is only one card in the deck. Han can ramp with any card because of Han's ability, and also the fact that yes, the Iden control deck makes a lot of your cards useless or a lot worse, but then you can just simply resource those useless cards so you can play the important cards faster. And all this is very good for Han. Han is a deck that is extremely resilient. We're going to see that in more details later on, and has a lot of tools to deal with control strategies in general. So we're going to go over this. So the first thing, of course, is to be careful with Super Laser Blast and also Bombing Run. Bombing Run is actually quite good against Han, so play around those cards is very important. Use your Wailed to counter the Entrench, just like for the Boba deck. And then the loop, Home 1, Bright Hope, and Mon Mothma, so you never run out of gas. So this is something I was talking about when I was saying that the deck is very resilient, is like it has a huge draw engine, where you play Home 1, so you play Home 1 for 9, so Home 1 plus 1 resource for the Bright Hope. You get the Bright Hope, you bounce the Mouse Mothma back into your hand, you draw a card, then you can play Mon Mothma, you can search another Home 1. Even if your opponent plays Super Laser Blast after Super Laser Blast, you can basically completely rebuild your board and draw a bunch of cards at the same time. It's a very resilient deck. It's a deck that is able to provide a tremendous amount of value while putting massive threats on the board that will kill the opponent very quickly if they're not dealt with. So I think Han has a lot of very great tools, and not only that, he's able to play those very big threats very early on in the game thanks to his abilities. So that is a lot of great tools. So another cool thing about Han is like it has access to a unit that can attack right away. So we talked about how strong Fire Spray is in the matchup. Falcon is also, to a lesser extent, a very strong card in the matchup. And not only that, you can play the Falcon, you can replay them with your Home 1, and then you can play U-Wing to bring the Falcon as well. So it's like you're playing 9 copies of Falcon in your deck. Like it's just gonna be a card that's gonna keep coming, keep dealing damage, and keep being a pain in the butt for the opponent. So yeah, the deck has a lot of tools, but we can make this matchup even better. So how do we make this matchup better? Well, simply by playing hand discard. Obviously, the card that you're the most afraid of when you're playing against this deck is Super Laser Blast, and to a lesser extent Bombing Run. But good news is that we got some inaspect card that we can run to discard them, and simply is the Spark of Rebellion. And by the way, Spark of Rebellion is already a great card in hand. So play this card either in the sideboard in the main deck. Personally, in my newest version of Han, I played 2 in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard, and this allows me to deal with those Super Laser Blast, those Bombing Runs, all those cards which I know that can answer. Also, Vanquish is very strong against us. Want to get rid of those Vanquish, give more chances for those Home 1s to stick on the board. And then obviously we got Body Rook. Body Rook is so incredibly strong because not only does it discard a card, it also leaves a unit on the board, and your opponent almost only plays non-unit cards, so you're going to have a lot of options of things to choose from. And a great thing about Body Rook is that it's a rebel, meaning that you can get it from Mon Mothma, and it's also a 3 resources card, meaning that you can actually play this card from U-Wing Reinforcement, ignoring the aspect penalty, because obviously in this deck Body Rook costs 5. The fact that it costs 5, by the way, is not really that big of a deal, because once again it's a control deck, you got plenty of time to play your cards. So you can get this from the U-Wing Reinforcement, and you can also play this from your Home 1. If you play Home 1, you pay 2 extra resources, you reanimate Body Rook, it's game over because you basically played a massive threat and then you played another threat that will allow you to deal with whatever answer your opponent might have. So it's just incredibly effective. So I personally now I'm thinking about putting 2 body rooks in my sideboard specifically to improve this matchup. Really amazing with U-wing reinforcement and with Home 1, and also with Mos Mothma. And keep in mind, you can also play Bright Hope to bounce back the body rook back into your hand, and then so you can draw a card and then replay it to discard a card. And that's really not like this is what I'm talking about when I say that those kind of decks are a lot of fun. Like meaning the control decks, because it forces you to it engage a different part of your brain. It makes it so you have to think differently and develop new strategy to counter those decks. It just makes the game so much more fun, in my opinion, because it's engaging to feel like you're having an impact on the game, because you can think about, okay, well, what can I do to improve my matchup against this? And I really encourage anybody to kind of go through that exercise and kind of think about this, and think about all the cool and new interaction that this game offers you. Next, we got Vader. So, Vader has a pretty terrible matchup against those style of deck because not fast enough to really put pressure, and too slow, still suffers a lot from Super Laser Blast and all that stuff, which is very annoying. And Vader does not have access to Vigilance, and so therefore it cannot really play the milling game with the control deck. So what are the options for Vader? Well, the option is to overpower your opponent with late game threats that are difficult to deal with, just like I've mentioned earlier with the Relentless and all that stuff. A few other tips. You can use your Vader ping even if there's no unit in play. That is actually quite important in the matchup because there's going to be a lot of situations where there's going to be no unit in play. But you can still ping with Vaders over and over again to kind of offset the healing from Iden. And that is quite important because in this matchup, as the Vader player, you're the aggressor, so being able to deal damage is very important. One of the great qualities that Vader has over Boba is that you can kill your own Super Laser Technician with Vader, and that's a very big deal because it means that you will be able to ramp much more reliably, and obviously in this matchup, you want to ramp as quickly as possible because you want to overpower your opponent. So here's the card that I advise. So we already talked about this, trying to overpower your opponent by simply playing super late game cards that are difficult to deal with, finds a way to get those cards back into your hand, and find ways to search for those cards. Another bonus card that is actually very good in this matchup, if you're playing Vader, is Force Surrender. Basically, as I said earlier, the Iden red deck is very good at answering threats, and in the very late stage of the game, really relies on drawing 2 cards per turn in order to be able to have enough gas. But if you're running Hand Discard and Hand Disruption, you can really mess with that and basically turn a situation where basically your opponent is going to be out of gas. And Force Surrender can do that very well. So multiple Force Surrenders are extremely powerful. Yes, it's a very slow card, but in this matchup it really doesn't matter. And because of Vader's ping, you can really very consistently trigger Force Surrender without even needing to attack. So typical situation would be you play Viper Prop Droid, or you play like a small threat, or even like a Stormtrooper. Your opponent deals with it, and then even if your opponent dealt with that unit, all you got to do is use Vader's ping, and then you get to play Force Surrender, and suddenly you draw 2 more cards, your opponent discard 2 more cards, and suddenly you're very far ahead. So Force Surrender is an excellent card if you're playing any red deck that is a bit mid-range or a bit more control-y or mid-rangey, and you want to fight against those kind of pure control decks. Force Surrender is an excellent card. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and this is something that I really would like to encourage the community, is that whenever a new strategy comes around, a new things, don't stay stuck on your first impressions like, oh no, this is not fun to play with, this is not fair. Like, yeah, I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, it's unfair, it's not playing the game the way it's supposed to be played. And I really encourage those people to, instead of basing themselves on their first impression, try to think about a way to counter those decks because that is by itself very fun to do. Like as I said, all the research that I had to do to come up with this video, it was very fun. It was very fun for me to think, to engage my brain in a different way and think about how I can actually improve the matchup and how I can beat those decks. Um, and it will, the process itself is fun, and also whenever in tournament you're going to be encountering those decks, now because you have a real plan on how to beat those decks, it's going to make it's going to make the matchup and it's going to make playing against those decks a lot more enjoyable as well for you. So I think it's not only about winning or losing, it's about the thought process and trying to make the game more enjoyable regardless of what kind of strategy your opponent decide to play. So I understand that if someone comes into a weekly play against new players and play an Iden red control deck, I think it's a bad idea because obviously those people are very new to the game. They don't have the necessary knowledge to kind of know how to counter those decks, and those decks can be a very negative play experience if you don't know what to do against them, if you don't know how to deal with them. However, if you are more advanced players, or if you bring this deck to any like further tournaments, or if you bring this deck against people that you know are really good at the game, then I don't see any problem with that, because here's the thing: there's more than enough tools in the game. I think FFG has designed this first set very well and has given us right from set 1 a lot of tools for us to deal with that kind of strategy, and that was very clever from them. We have the tools to deal with those kind of decks, so don't be afraid, and try those tools on the set and see what works for you. And I'm sure there's plenty of other ideas out there. By the way, put in the comments below if you find any cool ideas that would help in this matchup. Then feel free to put it on comments below and we can talk about it. And I think it's awesome and it's fun. And I think that you should engage with this and engage with this in a positive way rather than going doom and gloom and saying, well, this is nothing we can do. The game is ruined because people play that. As a player, you have agency. You have agency. You can play different decks. You can play different cards. And you can change your playstyle as well. There's loads of things that we can do to improve that. And only when you've tried those things are you entitled to say, well, this is a problem and it needs to be banned. Because if you haven't done that work before, you should not say a card needs to be banned, or you should not say this strategy should not be played or whatever, if you haven't put the necessary effort beforehand to try to beat that strategy. Anyway, I hope this video was useful, and if you would like me to do more counterplay kind of strategy video, feel free to tell me and I'll work on it. And thank you so much for watching this video to the end, and see you next time.